everyone. I'm Steve Kozlowski. I'll be providing introduction into Deniz and my recent paper. And it's, again, as with Deniz's other COVID-19 paper, it's very early research. We have a lot of work to do on it yet, a lot of details to fill in. So any comments, any feedback would be greatly appreciated from the attendees.
Mm-hmm. And PhD students.
Yes,
Particularly.
yes, especially, yes. Yeah, the young brains.
The babies. You need to ask questions, okay?
Okay, so to begin the scenario, I think we're all aware of the scenario behind COVID-19 and the impact on the business community in particular. Activities have been ceased, have been diminished significantly, and in our research, we're going to look at providing a technology solution to help businesses get back on track. One area that possibly hasn't received as much press with respect to business issues has been the impact on back office operations for a business. And our paper is going to focus specifically on accounting back office operations, but there's been much press about factories being shuttered for weeks on end and so forth, but not much on the back office operations, paying the bills that have to be paid, dealing with the customer base, and so forth. And then, of course, we're all aware of the impact of the pandemic on all of us as far as working from home and such, and the challenges that presents. These days, with the significant amount of technology that is made available in most business settings, a lot of that technology infrastructure is available in the office setting. Is this technology, is this infrastructure available for remote workers? How can it be done? Can RPA assist in that? In looking at RPA, quite a few firms have already implemented RPA solutions in their organization. If we're looking at talking to a firm that has already implemented RPA, they're probably a leg up on a firm that has not implemented RPA yet, as far as continuing that, rolling the RPA out more significantly. Either way, though, we need to make sure that the firms audit internal, external resources, do assess the proposed implementation, the proposed rollout. For firms that have implemented before, again, look at the documentation from their past rollouts, look at the success of their past rollouts on RPA before they move forward with additional rollouts. And the one area that we are going to focus on, and our paper is going to expand on this, is using an accepted strategy for these rollouts in the pandemic situation. Activities a firm may need to undertake on a fairly quick turnaround to provide support for business processes and such, maybe a faster turnaround than they would normally have undertaken when implementing new technology. We're going to focus on the COVID framework itself, and from the perspective of COVID, they describe RPA as end user computing application. Deloitte has published quite a bit of information in this area, and so in our research, we're going to be leveraging a lot of the information Deloitte has provided. This first area, they're talking about the control aspects to make sure that with the technology implementation, we're not forgetting about maintaining, enhancing control activities, version change, data integrity control, monitoring, and then setting a baseline for the expectations from this new technology implementation. In addition, we have some more work published by Deloitte and their proposal for a framework. And again, our research, we're going to expand on this framework, these items, from the perspective of hopefully a fairly rapid RPA deployment to address immediate business concerns and issues. So establishing the framework, identifying the appropriate tool. If the firm is already utilizing an RPA tool, probably continue with that particular tool, if not identifying an appropriate tool. Controls, again, ensuring that by automating a manual process that we are not losing anything with respect to the control framework, and enhancing our controls, access to the various aspects of the system. Change management, as with the pandemic, business processes may be changing on an ongoing basis. Well, if we're implementing RPA, can we make sure that we can tailor that appropriately as business activities change? And then lastly, but not least, capabilities, processes to monitor for, detect, report any issues with the technology, and escalate any errors that have been identified with this particular technology. A little bit on RPA, which I think we're pretty much all familiar with. The best use of RPA is applying it to well-defined and unambiguous business processes, precise instructions. High volume, repetitive tasks would take advantage and leverage the efficiency of RPA to undertake a lot more work than a human employee can do. Mature tasks, predictable outcomes also are preferred. And to maintain the efficiency and best benefit of RPA, unattended tasks, tasks that don't require any human intervention, which would slow down the process itself. Now the next items specifically refer to an accounting finance department, although we believe that these could be expanded out to other back office operations, but some of these comments are specific to accounting. First, has the department identified performance criteria with the processes we're looking to migrate to RPA? Things like invoice processing. How many invoices does the firm process currently? How many invoices should the firm be processing currently? In any of these processes, are there bottlenecks in the processes that will need to be resolved before we attempt to automate a manual task? Do we have any situations, and I'm sure there are still accounting functions that have a situation of moving data between systems where they take information from their accounting information system, populate it into a spreadsheet, a departmental spreadsheet, and perform some additional computation calculations off of the spreadsheet. How can we address that bottleneck in particular with an automated solution? And then for an accounting function, specifically during the close, the critical activity for the accounting department, what other activities have to occur during the close beside the close itself? There employee limitations, creating bottlenecks in these areas. Can we automate these areas to offload work from employees to focus more on the close activities? And also performance criteria for the close activities itself. Has the firm identified those? How quickly do adjusting entries have to be posted? How quickly do accruals have to be posted? Preparation of the financial statements in draft and final mode, and so forth. Specific to the pandemic, and here areas which we believe RPA can assist, is communications. If all the employees are working from home, the communication tool, I think, defaults to email. I know I've been receiving significantly more emails during my time working at home. So can we use RPA to basically organize, prioritize, the significant increase in emails to keep some level of efficiency with the employees? Access to the resources, again, the technology infrastructure that exists in the office but may not exist to a home office worker. Can RPA assist in that activity? And provide these resources to the employee. Another area is, depending on the significance of the employee disruptions for a firm, are we looking to implement specific job functions, or are there entire job positions that need to be automated? If the firm has already automated some of these individual job functions, then again, they're probably a leg up in being able to roll these into an entire job function. But that could be a very significant undertaking, trying to coordinate any number of individual functions with a technology solution. In the essence of time to get some of these solutions in place, may have to look for a attended RPA solution, so we still have some human interaction there, just to be able to get some level of automation going in the short term. Other items related to the pandemic and RPA. RPA has been known to provide cost savings by automating functions. Now, possibility of utilizing these cost savings to enhance, and improve the revenue downturn that firms might have faced due to business losses and such. So it might help to improve their bottom line. For firms that have lost a significant number of employees or have had to add a significant number of new employees, utilizing RPA to automate the onboarding activities. It may just be more significant than the current staff can undertake. And also when we are bringing on board remote workers, maybe a lot of additional tasks that need to be undertaken, providing them appropriate internet access and ensuring that their home office is configured appropriately. Next bullet point here, this is when organizations are looking to start reopening their offices, but using RPA tools to assess individual employee health conditions before the employees all return to the office, to try to maintain the safest environment for all of the employees once the firm starts reopening and employees start coming together again. And then also for those firms, and there are a few that have experienced a significant increase in their business activity due to the pandemic, home delivery services and such, utilizing RPA to help them undertake their greatly expanded activities and job functions that they need to undertake also. Because as we know, generally the bots can operate on a 24/7 basis. Okay, so that's the background information. Now I'm going to turn it over to Denise to give us information on our proposal itself.
Thank you so much, Steve. Like I mentioned, this has nothing to do with ethics. It has more to do with, the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic, like Steve mentioned, may magnify or increase the potential use of RPA. And we're proposing that this adoption has to either be considered in two different lights. One, whether you already have RPA in place in some of your processes in the back office, or whether you're looking at it as a new adoption for your systems, because most of your employees are remotely located and you have a lot of back-end operations that are being conducted in your office and the office system. Basically, we're expanding on the Deloitte 2020 framework, and these are some of the issues that accompany each of the points that are specific to COVID-19. So obviously, you should have a framework, a governance framework, either in place already if you're already using RPA, or you need to install one or have one in conjunction with your RPA adoption. And it should actually look at the processes which have changed because of COVID-19. And so that also would mean that perhaps COVID-19 has broken your process, and that must be re-engineered. And if that re-engineering must occur, then of course the RPA must also be re-engineered. So will this redesigning or the re-engineering process create additional risks? I mean, so there has to be a new risk assessment conducted. Are there new regulatory compliance issues that may come into play? So there could be an increased cybersecurity issues, particularly if employees are attending to it from a remote location, using TeamViewer or other types of screen sharing tools where they can remotely access the system, which is located physically in the company or in the business, or have to access a desktop to manage like slight changes in the RPA. How would that look, and can they be in maintained a secure environment? Then also you want to make sure you select an appropriate tool and make sure that we develop automation coding configuration. This is standard software development practices, making sure there's thorough documentation. if you're already implementing RPA, perhaps there's no reprogramming, reconfiguring that may need to be required. Maybe it's the difference of how the employee monitors the RPA remotely. So using any kind of these office-based systems where you can use a VPN, for example, or using TeamViewer or AnyDesk to remotely access the system. But so that would not necessarily change the RPA, but how the employee would interact with an intended RPA system. Next slide, please. So we also want to hopefully leverage and enhance existing controls. We will need to reevaluate the impact of operating bots under these COVID-19 conditions. You may have to redesign your controls, and I would argue that probably the controls around information security will need to be enhanced. And also you have to look at whether any controls are now bypassed by the bot under this new condition. So reassess the risks. Do existing controls address these new COVID-19 RPA risks? And also whether are some RPA processes enabling better controls because we are automating? So less human intervention arguably could mean that the controls are better satisfied because, as we all know, controls are usually issues, even if the technology are centered around humans and human fallibilities and issues that we create as humans. And, basically, we may want to conduct impact assessment following like the NIST 2012 framework, which looks at the probability of something occurring and the impact, and how would it show the likelihood of how would it show in your system. So that's a very good a framework to also use in this particular part of examining controls. Next slide, please. So basically, we also want to look at establishing users and bot accesses. So the big issue here is how do we, when people are conducting everything remotely, how do we differentiate between bots versus humans? And so we need to probably establish stronger identity access management controls. And this would be a way of also managing our segregation of duties, but also we have to make sure we can identify when is something being conducted by a bot versus a human when everybody's remote. So the bot might be, it's already configured as a remote or electronic transaction. The person is also remote. So how do we configure that in the system? So do we have to modify our existing and end user controls? And would that allow us to operate effectively? So what is the best practice for managing credentials in this situation where everybody's remote and we have remotely located RPA or just one that we're not accessing or attending directly? So what is the best practice for managing the credentials of a bot that works in tandem with a human worker, where they're sharing tasks throughout the process? And how do you show where one is handshaken or handed off from one to the other? And how do we define the RPA's bot's role under COVID-19? How do we monitor the RPA during COVID-19? How does the RPA bot present a threat to access management? So, again, this goes to the designing of the controls of access management. And how does the developer access the bot during COVID-19 to redesign or reconfigure the bot and do this efficiently and securely? And then will the RPA eventually become unattended? And what are those controls that we need to put in place to manage the unattended bot? So next slide, please. So we have to define the procedures to manage a changing environment. So this is also critical for RPA and also for those systems without RPA. So many companies are faced with the fact that with this new remote environment where employees are working from home or other locations and are not in a facility in a confined control environment, we have to look at all the controls around this new environment and the new circumstances. And we may have to also look at change management. So how do we change our systems and what kind of controls do they affect? So looking at design evaluation, performance evaluation, benchmark creation, and also reporting the format design. So all this are areas that have to be re-examined under COVID-19, regardless of RPA, but especially so under RPA implementation. Next slide, please. So we have to develop capabilities to detect and report issues. So with accountants being remotely located, how often do they monitor RPA systems to see what's going on? Are there failures? Are they operating as planned? So the big issue might be that a lot of the RPA coding may have to change because of new locations of documentation, or for example, or new structures of documentation, or new locations of web pages. It depends on the kind of activity that we are automating. But so, there could be bigger chances of failures. And because of remote locations, these changes may occur without notice. And so how will the bot performance be monitored? Do we have to monitor more frequently from a remote location? How will we conduct that? And what is the nature of the failure we most likely anticipate seeing? And for example, like I mentioned just a minute ago, something could have changed with source documentation or the pathway. And this is something that could happen very quickly and frequently in this environment. And then we have to know what the impact of the issue would be. So if you don't know about a bot failure for half a day, what kind of impact would that have on our reporting and our accounting activities? But RPA could enhance the reporting process. So for example, one way we can see that perhaps it would assist us as accountants. So with all the meetings that are occurring in Zoom these days, RPA could easily access the text, so this meeting here has a text that's being recorded or filed by Zoom, and it's provided particularly for the messaging and chat, but also it can be used also for transcription of the conference, and that could be automatically coded and documented by an RPA process instead of a human being. Next slide, please. So we also have to define the processes that we would use to monitor and escalate errors. So this goes to the previous slide. So how does management monitor remote RPA and its impact on controls and its output under COVID-19? And how do we evaluate the RPA compliance with internal controls? So we don't know how this is all going to shake out for most public companies that have to answer to Sarbanes-Oxley over time, but I think that everyone's got to re-examine their RPA applications and our ability to work remotely using RPA under Kozlowski principles. So hopefully and thankfully, due to the nature of RPA, bot statistics are easily gathered and generated. So it's easier perhaps to at least have audit trails of how the RPA performed. But also we need to make sure we address the communication between management and employees to make sure that we also know where the issues might exist with the robot. Next slide, please. So we see that in conclusion, RPA technology is being used to replace high volume, unambiguous and repetitious tasks due to the nature of the workforce and the kind of work we do as accountants and auditors, and particularly so under RPA. So companies may either be undertaking new deployments, or they may actually have to redesign their current deployment of RPA. And we argue that these have to be reprogrammed most likely, and the management has to take into account the potential impacts on controls of any kind of large-scale RPA deployment. So also we have to look at the issues of how this would replace accounting positions, particularly when we're looking at remote employees who are already concerned about their work and loss of business of some companies. How can the accountants then be redeployed to conduct more analytical tasks now that we're not doing such routine back office programming or back office accounting tasks? The personal aspect of deploying RPAs in this time of quarantines and employee isolation cannot be discounted or ignored. So employees may feel very, very comfortable deploying additional RPA or even undertaking new RPA because they're isolated. They're not working, in a crowded office environment with other people. They're alone. They feel maybe not lacking mentorship. We have to not ignore this, because this could cause some instances of employee resentment or possible potential use of lead to possible potential fraud in some areas or other kinds of employee malfeasance. So we have to be aware of that. Plus we want our employees to be happy. So accountants should be happy in their work. So employee management should definitely strategize and communicate the RPA plans to employees beforehand, not just surprise or hatch this new process upon them, that they should be part of the process and feel like they're involved and they have some stake in the game. So with that, I thank you very much for your time, and we hope that you have some questions for us. And particularly from PhD students, we would really welcome your comments and suggestions. Steve and I were PhD students once ourselves, and we were encouraged to ask active questions at the W cars.
Okay, thanks for that. Dennis, there actually are several questions. Sebastian Muller wants to know, to what extent do you believe RPA technology to automate internal control functions tasks?
Well, so I mean, again, so this could be done to like automate. The RPAs could automate the collection of audit trails or audit log files, system log files, and we can see, and these are indicative of internal control adherence, right? So if you have a business process modeling notation or a graph or process mining software, even so, right now in my classes we're using Celonis process mining. I see where that could easily be. RPA could easily automate the collection of the audit log files, log that into or upload it into a Celonis process mining tool, and that could actually help us see whether internal controls are being adhered to in the firm.
Okay, Letitia Jesperson wants to know, is there an efficient way to monitor SODs between bots and bot owners? I'm not sure what SOD is.
Yeah, that's my question too. What's SODs?
Separation of duties.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. This is a good question. That's why we brought it up. I mean, so, what would the audit or the system footprint be of a bot versus a employee? And, would there be a handshake in the system that shows like when one person's taking over and the bot takes over and vice versa? So we have to have a better understanding of that, and the controls need to be designed around that. So the controls would be different probably for a bot versus a human being.
Okay, one last question, which I think is a very good one, from who I believe is one of our students.
Okay, good. I'll let.
Yeah, good.
Finally.
He gets an A for the class, right?
No, I just send a nasty chat note. Where are they? Are they sleeping and just leaving their thing? I want to see attention here.
All right.
Hi, Steve.
Josh. All right. Will the 24/7 bots present new challenges to the organization?
Steve, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, it depends upon the IT infrastructure. Are there IT operations that are currently running 24/7? Are there monitors and such? Maybe individuals assessing that. If that's the case, it may be fairly easy to add some monitors for the RPA processes. If the firm does not have a 24/7 IT infrastructure, then that may be much more of a challenge, much more of a hurdle to undertake.
Well, I think the more general question that's raised there is, are these RPAs, are they meant to complement the human or to replace and substitute for the human, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's a general question. I mean, beyond this, that we can address in this paper, or we can mention, but it's beyond the scope of this paper. In some ways, it goes to all the technology that we encourage in this platform, right? So, I mean, there really are tools. I mean, they still require human attendance and monitoring. But the idea is that the automation takes away the human frailties of, that we make mistakes over time and we're not consistent with our efforts, and the machine is better with repetitive tasks. And I'm not sure that many of our accounting students enjoy the idea that they'll be doing routine back office work when after spending a lot of money and time and effort on a degree in accounting or a master's in accounting, they go work for a firm and they're doing just basic routine work and nothing that's exciting. So I think that if we frame it that way, that students would see it differently, or accountants would see it differently. So these are just tools that take you away from the mundane routine task, but we still have to be mindful of the controls that may change given the new RPA COVID environment.
Well, I think some of our students might agree that a boring paid job is better than exciting unemployment, right?
Exactly.
All right, but with that, let's move on. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.